Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is the Roaming Prepper, and thank you for joining me this afternoon. This was kind of a last-minute video. It's just something that's been floating around my head. I figured today'd be as good a day as any. So while I'm still on lunch break, working remote because they canceled meetings, but then they added new ones. So I'm working remote so I can figure out what the hell's going on. Wanted to share this thought with you, so I'll be right back. And my question on today's video is, why did it take so long? What am I talking about? We'll find out in a minute. I'll be right back. Thanks for coming back, everybody, and welcome to the channel. As always, I normally try to premiere these videos, but if I do not, or I miss my own premiere because of work, feel free to leave any questions or comments in the comments below the video. Sorry, it's been a day. As you can tell, my voice is kind of going away. Anyway, what was I talking about? Why did it take so long? Why did what take so long? Why did it take Russia so long to start hitting infrastructure targets? Good question. From the outset of the war, me personally and a few other people who've studied history, especially the history of the more modern wars, why did it take so long? Even the Romans in their heyday would burn farm fields, destroy bridges, and damage and set fire to dams to discombobulate, for lack of a better word, their opponent. They were notorious for this. So why in the modern war did Russia wait so long? I think there are a couple of reasons. And I also want to go into what we can learn from this if a larger conflict escalates. So first of all, let's rewind to World War II, which most of us have probably read about. Early in the war, many of us have read about the Battle of Britain. What people don't realize is early in the war, because of the atrocities that happened in World War I on both sides, specifically the indiscriminate shelling and use of mustard and chlorine gas against other troops, a lot of civilians were caught in the crossfire unintentionally. So they made an agreement, the Geneva Convention, whereby chemical and biological weapons were not allowed, and the targeting of civilian populations just for the purpose of killing people was discouraged. Unless it had a military purpose. So when World War II breaks out, 15, 20 years later, they actually were both obeying the rules. Now, this was before the U.S. got involved, but France, Britain, and Germany were targeting each other's military targets. And then, civilian targets were getting hit as a collateral, but they weren't being targeted specifically. I believe it was 1939 or 1940-ish, sometimes early in the war, I can't remember exactly when, the Blitzkrieg was supremely successful. The Germans are just steamrolling across Europe. Japan is expanding in the Pacific. This is before the U.S. got involved. And the Luftwaffe, which was Germany's Air Force, did a great job at tearing up the British bombers when they tried to counterattack. So the British tried night bombing, but one of the raids got screwed up. They got lost because the technology at the time was a bit rudimentary, and I guess I lost their bearings, or there was weather. I don't remember the exact reasons, but the British inadvertently bombed a civilian town, basically. It had no military value. They got through cloud cover, and boom, there was this, they thought it was a city that had manufacturing for tanks. They actually attacked the wrong place. Completely unintentional. But when it happened, it pissed off the Germans, and then Hitler and his generals were like, oh, okay, I guess now we're attacking civilian targets. And that's when the Battle of Britain really started, because then the Germans turned their attention away from airfields and military bases and started hitting civilian targets. Now, at the end of the war, it turned out that was a blessing in disguise, because had the Germans focused on the supply chain, the fuel, the airfields, and the defenses, they probably would have crushed Britain's defenses. But because they were redirecting their attention to the civilian populations, basically trying to obliterate the cities and the factories, the military was able to keep their airfields working well enough so the Royal Air Force was able to give a hell of a time to the Germans. And ultimately, that prevented Germany from physically invading England. It may have been a big factor in why the war was won the way it was, but there are a few other things like Hitler's hesitation to take the beach at Dunkirk and a few other things that had happened. But anyway, at the beginning of the war, they were not targeting civilians. As you go later into the war, they were specifically targeting infrastructure. They were taking out bridges. Obviously, they have a military value, but also taking out power grids, taking out plants, taking out manufacturing. The modern war context is to completely blind and discombobulate your enemy. So when the US and its allies went into Iraq, there was a bombing campaign that went on for weeks in Desert Storm and Desert Shield, and a lot of it was aimed not only at the defensive positions of the Iraqis, but take out the power grid, take out the phones, take out the internet, take out, you know, whatever was necessary to force the population to flee to cause more pressure on the opposing force. So then when the ground war started, it lasted, what, 72 hours? It didn't take that long because they had already been spread so thin. So now let's fast forward again. Let's go back to Russia and Ukraine. Had it been me, in my mindset, having seen history and read about it, I would think the Russians would have not only hit the airfields and the military targets, and they did try to get the president, Zelensky, directly, but why not the infrastructure, right? All of us remember Zelensky making a video on his little iPhone. He had his security guys around him. You could hear shooting like 3 blocks away, and he's telling people, hey, the Russians sent paratroopers to basically assassinate me and take me out of the picture, but they failed, and now they're fighting my security team, and, you know, we will fight, you know, Slava Ukraine and all that. But the lights were on when he did that. The internet was up. Now, a lot of people say, well, Elon Musk and his satellites. Yeah, but it took a while for Elon's people to get those satellites into those positions. That wasn't instantaneous, right? They had to be redirected and launched and put in orbit and whatnot. The bottom line is, from the get-go, the Russians avoided a lot of the water, municipal, sewer, sanitation, and electrical grid, other than the fact that they started fighting over Chernobyl, and there are a lot of stories as to why that was the case. But they didn't attack the infrastructure. However, now Ukraine attacked a bridge, which in my mind is a purely military move, and now it's become an excuse for Putin to go, oh, okay, well, you know what? Now we're attacking things that are not military bases, so now we'll blow up your bridges and bomb your college and blow up a playground and all that shit. So personally to me, I'm shocked it took this long. I'm shocked that the Russians took this long. Now, it could be a variety of reasons. The ground war may not be going the way they want. They may be ready to enter a new phase of the ground war. Now it's like, okay, well, we tried to do this nicely, and that didn't work. So now we're going to put them in the dark and let them fight, and the people can starve and run out of water and whatnot. So it's hard to say exactly what's going on, but I'm absolutely shocked that it took this long for the Russians to go there and specifically start targeting civilian targets. But that's what's going to happen now, and I suspect that will continue, although Russia got a lot of backlash from the international community, so they may keep it a little bit more on the targeted down low, but it'll continue to happen. So you're probably wondering, okay, Pete, well, that's great. Well, what does this have to do with preppers somewhere else? Well, you think about it, that is going to be the face of the next modern war, the true, any global conflict, whether it's us and China, whether it's China and Russia, whether it's Russia and NATO, whatever scenario you want to pick, you're going to have operators in each other's countries. We already know that's the case. Okay, the Ukrainian attack, or the attack on the bridge, which Ukraine has not formally accepted responsibility for, was likely operators because that bridge was very heavily defended. So they probably had spies, collaborators, saboteurs, insurgents, whatever you want to call them, allied to them inside Russia who executed this attack. Now, there was a boat involved. If you look at the newer videos, you can see a boat kind of peek out before it detonates, which is why one of the spans collapsed, but the other one just caught fire. It wasn't a missile strike because that would have blown everything apart. And it wasn't a truck bomb because the pavement, if you look at the sections that collapsed, the pavement would have been singed and burned, because I've seen IEDs go off and it would have left fragments everywhere. No, the road surface was perfect. It looked like the legs had been cut out of the bridge and it fell down. If you look at it, it didn't blow up like this. It blew up like that. Like something popped it up and went plump. And that's what it looks like the legs got taken out from under it. There's Squeaky Toy Boy again. That's the puppy, by the way. So, what does this mean in a future global conflict? Well, what it means is all bets are off the table, right? If we go into any kind of conflict, let's assume we take nukes off the table entirely. Operators are going to go into place. What would be the best way to discombobulate, say, China? Well, take out its railway system so people can't get food. They're on the verge of having riots over there anyway. That would absolutely screw them up. Or take down their comms. What about the U.S.? Take out our internet? You know, the young kids can't go on TikTok. They're going to flip out, put us in the dark. Absolutely possible. A hack, an EMP, or just specifically physically bomb power stations. You know, you take 4 or 5 out across the West Coast, you're going to leave California, Oregon, and Seattle, Oregon, Washington, and California in the dark, and probably large swaths of Nevada and Arizona as well, right? Texas has its own grid. We've already seen the weather take it down. You could probably take out a few places here, go after the refineries. This is the kind of warfare we would see in a future war. A lot of people think it'll be missiles flying back and forth. It may be. But on the front end, it's going to be hurt the other country to weaken their resolve. Personally, I'm shocked that it took Russia this long. I think Russia's intent was to decapitate Ukraine and place their own government, and that didn't pan out. So they said, well, we'll try and strong-arm it, and it didn't work. So now I think we're seeing a new phase, and Russia may think they're justified, and they may well be, depending on the rules of war, that, well, now you targeted a civilian item, so now we're going to do it too. So you can debate that, you know, a lot of different ways, but in a larger conflict, that's something preppers and people of the preparedness mindset need to really consider, is that it won't just be attacking plants, manufacturing plants, or attacking docks, or attacking military targets. You want to really screw up a country, start blowing up a Walmart, or make people, you know, take out the gas pipeline or the railroad so we can't get gasoline to the East Coast. Take the grid offline. Personally, I think a hack or an EMP would not be a symmetric hit across the country. I think different parts of the country, depending on geography, lithology, the weather at the time, whether it's a hack or an EMP, I don't think the grid will go down the same way all over the country. Some parts may stay up, some parts may stay down. What you're going to see is a lot of people starting to move around because, well, wow, you know, I'm Chicago. Chicago's in a blackout, but New York City may not be. Right? So people are going to gravitate to where there's comfort and security, and that's going to draw resources from the battle into the domestic realm in order to keep control of that kind of stuff. So you can learn a lot from what's happening to the Ukrainians right now, not just what happened before. And granted, the Russians destroyed entire towns having fights with the Ukrainians, but they weren't deliberately targeting the towns. They were targeting the enemy forces, and the town was the battlefield, and they destroyed the town. Now you're going to start seeing the targeting of infrastructure targets going forward, as is needed by both sides to affect the fighting ability of the other. And I think this is also going to play out in the larger picture. If the conflict expands to the US, China, India, whatever, you're going to start seeing not only military targets being attacked, but also infrastructure targets being attacked, possibly ahead of time, to throw the enemy off balance so that they can gain advantage in the battlefield. So guys, be prepared for those kind of things. Again, how do we prep for that stuff? Well, we're doing a lot of it already, right? Having the food, having the battery stash, having rechargeable lights, having flashlights, having jackeries or generators. Also know what, as far as transportation, will be affected if power goes down. You live in New York City. Those of you who are familiar with suburbs, there's this third rail, which is where the electricity comes from. Well, if the power grid goes out in New York, even if all they do is take out the subways, that's going to leave millions of people either stranded at work or stranded in the tunnels because the subway is offline. Imagine the mess that would make. It doesn't even have to be the whole city. They just take the subways offline and you now have a problem, right? Same thing with airports. You take the airport offline. We recently had a hacking attack on 11 to 14 of our airports. It didn't stop commercial air traffic. But again, you take the airlines offline. What's the default action? Put everyone on the ground. Well, now you have hundreds, if not tens of thousands of people stuck in the wrong place. They have to find accommodation. That's going to take resources away from responding to the situation to try to deal with the people who've been displaced, right? And we're not even talking about hospitals losing power or large apartments or losing heating and cooling ability in the very hot winters and summers we have in the U.S. So these are things you have to plan for. Again, a lot of us are already planning for it, right? The batteries you use for a hurricane, for a blackout, can also be used for a grid attack. So remember, a lot of what we're doing can be repurposed in a different scenario. So what you want to do is back up a bit. Don't plan for specific things like hurricane, tornado, flood, but look more holistically and say, okay, what can I use, say, the Jackery or my generator or my solar rechargeable lights? What else can this be used for? Well, this can be used for safety in the house, so I can see in the dark so I don't kill myself if the power gets knocked out. I can use it in front of my house for security so I can see who's approaching my home. You kind of get what I'm saying. But folks, this is the kind of war that may be going forward. And understand, we're dealing with powers, Russia, China, Iran, who do have missiles, who do have special operations. They do have people and the capability to varying degrees of hitting us here at home. And personally, and my dad said this before he passed away, and I don't disagree with what he said at the time, is this next war will come home in one way, shape, or form. It may not even be a nuke, but it'll be saboteurs, it'll be special operations, it'll be focused missile or hypersonic now, the hypersonic missile attacks focused on certain targets. So it's not going to be something you read about in the news. Your families will go out and go to Walmart and see, you know, the Target next door burning to the ground because the missile hit the target instead of the power station. Plan for those scenarios and psychologically ask yourself, what would I do if that hit my town? What would happen? Would we have an exodus to my area? This is important to plan for. You may want to be prepared to make your home look abandoned or very uninteresting. Do I have friends who may have to evacuate from a city or from another location to come to me? Another thing to consider. Okay, so this is just more scenarios, but I want to broaden the scope and make us all understand that in the future, world conflict will not necessarily be fought overseas. A submarine can go in the Gulf of Mexico and pop small rockets all over the southern coast. No nukes needed. And then disappear into the water with the Coast Guard chasing them right up their butt. But they only need 5-10 minutes to knock off those missiles and off they go. So again, learn from what the Ukrainians are seeing. They're running out of power. Water's being affected now. We've already talked about this for other scenarios. Remember the water preps, the meal preps, the food preps, the pews, the lighting. All of this can be used for multiple scenarios. So that's how you have to think when you spend your limited and hard-earned money on the product. Can I use this for only one scenario? Or can I use this for many? And the more you can use it for, the better that product is for your fit. Obviously, there may be some niche situations you may be dealing with where you may have to get a very specialized item for your preps. But remember, a flashlight is good in so many situations, even just breaking down on the side of the road. So, guys, think along those lines. Broaden the way you look at things, and it'll make things a lot easier. God forbid something happens, we won't get all caught flat-footed. But anyway, I just wanted to share that, not so much as a somber thing. We don't know where everything's going, but just as a lesson learned, watching what's happening there should educate us as to how we should be reacting and what we should be getting and what we should be planning on so that we don't get caught flat. Because remember, for every one of us watching one of these videos, whether it's my channel or one of the dozens of others that really put out good content. For every one of us in this community, there are going to be another 20 who will be absolutely freaked out and clueless. And a large portion of it depends on where you live and what the local demographic and culture are like. You know, you're out in the country or you're out in a smaller city where you have a lot of hunters, fishers, hikers, skiers. They're going to have stuff. Some more than others, but everyone kind of will get it. You go to a city where the majority of the people get winded walking around the block and they don't use the city parks. They've never been without power. They don't know how to make coffee on a fire. You're going to have a lot of freaked out people, and freaked out people become a problem. So guys, plan for those situations. Don't forget to catch Vision and Mad Shad tomorrow night, because we're going to talk exactly about that. Urban situations and how, if you live in a city or in a larger community, you may need to be thinking about how things can play out. So folks, thanks for joining me tonight. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, God bless, Godspeed, and I will see you on the next video. You guys take care of yourselves.